So the partnership started 3 years ago. Tony Powell, who is the Executive Director of Neighbourhoods at New Charter Housing, came and saw an outcome that we'd done with another community group as part of our community programme at the Exchange. It was a performance piece in the studio with a group of vulnerable adults, and he was brought to see it by a colleague and went away thinking that's quite an interesting way of using theatre and the creative arts to work with slightly vulnerable groups of individuals. And I wonder whether there's ways that I could use those approaches to work with some of the tenants and the students who New Charter engage with. And so he then came back and approached the theatre and said, is this possible? Can we look at setting up a partnership? And so there was a number of meetings. We went through quite a detailed planning process with Tony from New Charter and the then executive head of New Charter Academy, who since left but was very involved in setting the partnership up. Looking at what the partnership might be and what we could achieve and what they wanted it to do. And we boiled it down to a primary aim, which was looking at how to use arts and cultural activity to create sustainable cultural change in the neighbourhood. And by the neighbourhood, they meant the area immediately surrounding the locality of where the academy is based. Mm-hmm. So Broadoak and Smallshawhurst estates, and then the academy itself. So that was the start. And then since then, we've then developed a programme of activity that's run over the 3 years that's looked at various projects and programmes that in different ways address that main overarching aim. The first year was very much about trying to build up relationships and understand that local community. So there was quite a lot of time spent going out and doing quite a lot of grassroots work with local community groups and groups that New Charter already ran in the area. So going and meeting the local job clubs, going and meeting after school clubs, going and meeting parents groups at the primary school, going and meeting local community centres. And then at the end of that first year, we did a project that was just with students from the academy, because it felt like we didn't want to try and rush straight in and do projects that brought together the academy and the community straight away, because that was something that hadn't been happening and it felt like it was too much to try and do it straight away. So we started off with a project that was just for the academy, and it was about bringing a group of students here to the theatre to create a tour experience that introduced members of their community and family and friends and teachers to the Royal Exchange. So they worked with a practitioner from the theatre over about 10 sessions and created a visitor experience tour of the theatre. And then about 70 or 80 members of the community and other students from the school and family and friends came to have that tour, and the students took them on the tour, and they then all stayed and saw a production in the theatre that evening. And that was kind of the first point in which most members of the community had engaged with the theatre, and for a lot of them it was the first time they'd engaged in kind of coming to see a piece of professional theatre before. So that was the first year. The second year was beginning to look at whether there were projects that could not necessarily jump straight in and do work together, but could run parallel in both the academy and the community settings and then share work across. So the first of those was a project called Our Pals, which was inspired by the Accrington Pals, which was a play we had on at the theatre that was looking at how communities pulled together in World War One and what and the impact of a community going off to war had on how strong that community felt. So both adults from the community and young people from the academy came and saw the production, and they then went away and created various different responses to the production. So the adults worked with a professional writer and created a piece of script that was looking at some of the themes of community that came out of that piece, and that was performed by professional actors. And then the students from the academy went away and did a photography project that was documenting members of their local community and asking them what it meant to be part of a connected community. And then they also, as kind of byproduct, created a short piece of drama that was also responding to the themes. And then the piece of professional work that had been written by the adult community, the photography exhibition and the drama piece were brought together in a shared performance that took place twice. Once it happened in a community centre, and then it happened in the academy. And it was seen by a mixed audience of local residents and school students. And that felt like a really, and is talked of by the partners as quite a successful project in terms of although it was parallel and it happened separately, it very much linked the two together, and the theme of community became something that was a really strong creative starting point for that project. So that was the first of our year 2 projects. The second of our year 2 projects, we'd become aware over the course of a lot of groundwork in year 1 that there was a lot of gardening groups that existed in the local area. So we decided to do a project that engaged with those. So we worked with about 6 local gardening groups from the local area who were all adult groups. And we worked with a group of horticulture students who were studying in the academy. We've been quite keen with the academy to not necessarily work with their gifted and talented students or the students that were already succeeding and doing really well. We were quite keen to try and identify students within the academy who were local residents or new charter tenants or were struggling in some way, so that we were reaching a demographic that we thought were best, their needs were best met by this kind of activity. So the horticulture students at the academy are often students that struggle in more academic strands of the curriculum, so they were doing the horticulture project as a way of engaging them with school, so it felt like quite a nice group to work with. So we worked with the gardening groups and created a series of activities that happened in each of their gardening settings. We took them on walks between each of the community gardens, and we did creative artist-led activities in all of those gardens. So we started using the garden spaces as areas where creative activity could happen. And then we ran a mosaic project with the horticulture students, creating mosaics for the school grounds. So they were kind of looking at what they wanted to put into those grounds to improve the gardens and the life of the kind of cultural creative life of the academy. And then we also again linked the 2 strands up, so the students went on walks around the community gardens and met all the community gardeners, and there were opportunities, although there wasn't a massive take up, for community gardeners to come in and learn mosaic making skills and volunteer alongside the students. So that was something that didn't quite work, but there was definitely an intention for there to be quite a lot of crossover between those 2 strands. And then the third of the year 2 projects was the first point when it became truly intergenerational and cross-community and school, and that was a week, work experience week that happened here at the theatre. That was for adults from the community who were unemployed and were seeking skills to get back into employment, and for students from the academy who are identified as potentially needing some extra support to gain skills that would make them more employable in future. And so that was a mixed group of about 13 individuals who were here for a week and worked alongside each other, not split as adults and students, but working with each other intergenerationally on that project. And that was all about using theatre practice and theatre skills to develop more transferable skills. So for example, they worked with our marketing team, but rather than learning about how to create a piece of marketing publicity for a show, they were thinking about kind of how they would market themselves, how they would present themselves in interviews and job settings. So it was very much looking at employability skills. And that again was a really successful week, and at the end of that week they all left with references that they could then use when they were going and applying for future jobs and for kind of demonstrating what they'd learned through the course of the week. So that was where we'd reached by the end of year 2, where we'd kind of got a number of projects that had identified existing groups and individuals from the area who were wanting to get involved and had begun to find ways to sort of work across the academy and the community strands. And then for year 3, the challenge really was, how did we make something that genuinely felt like there were no longer the same barriers between academy and community, and how did we make something that felt like a real representation of what we'd learned over the 2 years of the partnership. And in essence, how did we begin to look at creating sustainable cultural change in that neighbourhood? So we went through quite a detailed planning process of trying to work out what that project would be and how it would best be delivered. And in the end, the Royal Exchange and New Charter Housing and New Charter Academy came to the agreement that we felt it needed to be something that probably happened outside, and that happened in a community location within that local area. We felt that we potentially didn't have on our radar quite the right artists from within the pool of artists who the Royal Exchange normally uses for that kind of, to do that kind of project. So we did a commission call out to identify a company or an artist who would come and work with us on that project. And through that call out, we met Chol Theatre, who were then appointed to be the artists who worked with us on the project, and they have a particular expertise in creating community-based and outdoor site-specific work. So it felt like their experiences and what we were trying to achieve matched quite well for this project. And so that's Everyday Heroes. The way that the project worked is it started in